Hey everyone, welcome to the Midpoint Review. I'm your host, AJ Tabando, and we've got a great show for you today. I'm joined by Sumi Shanmuganathan to talk about life at the midpoint, how to balance career ambitions, caretaking for family, startup hustle, and slow life goals all at once. Sumi has had a diverse career spanning politics, communications, and tech, and now she finds herself in a period of pause and reflection, and is using it to write and share her experiences. It's kind of like looking in a mirror, and I'm so here for it. Before we get started, shout out to our sponsor, Habit Coffee Club. Habit makes a smooth, full-bodied coffee that's perfect for those slow mornings when you want to just sit on a porch, sip a cup, and watch the world go by. If you're heading up to a cottage, make sure you pick up a bag, as this is the dream dockside drip. Visit www.habitcoffeeclub.com to order a bag or sign up for a subscription and use the promo code midpoint at checkout for 20% off. That's www.habitcoffeeclub.com. All right, let's start the show. Welcome everyone to the Midpoint Review. I'm super excited for today's guest, Sumi Shanmuganathan. Sumi has done it all. A former political advisor, candidate, and award-winning leader, she has worked across sectors from Microsoft to startups, nonprofits, and public institutions. She served as AVP of Marketing and Communications at George Brown College, launched Niche Strategies, a boutique brand agency, and is the co-founder and board director of Dunya Habitats, a Canadian agri-tech startup. And she's in a period of reflection. If you follow her on LinkedIn, you'll see she started writing some really incredibly thoughtful pieces on this period of life and how perspectives on career, family, growth, and life are evolving as a result. You know we love a good reflective period on this show, so I'm super excited to dig in. Sumi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, AJ. I'm glad to be here.
It's great to have you. So for those listeners who might not know you well, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Oh, wow. So I started my career in politics. I think a little similar to yourself. I've had many transitions since leaving politics. I've moved into nonprofit, into tech, and then most recently I was at post-secondary. That's sort of my resume, but I'm a bit of a jack of all trades is how I like to see myself. I soak in a lot of information. I'm a daughter of immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself. Came to Canada very young, lived through, I guess, whatever our Canadian dream is. I'm very fortunate to have had a great support system. I think of myself as someone from a large community, both family-wise, friends-wise, a professional network-wise. The folks that I have met through my political years, through tech and everything, have followed me through. So I'm a sponge for I guess people relationships and knowledge. So it's a little bit about, I think, what I'm kind of going through right now, which is like soaking in as much information as I can in my career transitions as I'm going through.
Yeah, I love that. The word that I heard come up a couple times that you just said was community. And I pick up on that because it's been very interesting as I've been doing these conversations through this podcast. How often I'm hearing people, particularly of our age, talking about the need for community. And as they're sort of reflecting on life up to this point, this sort of like realization, if they haven't had it before, of how important community is. So you mentioned that you kind of feel like you're part of a couple of different communities. How has that impacted you, and like how does that kind of play into the moment that you find yourself in now?
I think certainly my community has been large at certain times and very small and narrow at times. But the one thing that I love about the community that I have around me is that they are supportive. They're there to listen, help guide me through like the many transitions that I've had. I think starting off in politics, my community was quite large. I think as I would say like fellow colleagues were a part of that community. And then because of the nature of what we did, we were building relationships with other communities and whatnot. It was quite large. But when I left I did kind of feel out of place at some point as I transitioned out of government. And then over the years, there are times, certainly through COVID, that have like my community has got me through, whether it's tough personal decisions or career transitions. They've been sort of there listening and guiding as necessary for me. I'll admit to some years I have kind of like retreated in my shelf, and it's certain members of that community. It's like, Sumi, stop. come out of your shell, come back to us. Like, it's okay. Like, there are moments when there's fear, as always. Fear is something that I'm learning to acknowledge that it is there. It's okay to be there. And those community members, my friends, my colleagues, been there with me, helping me kind of like navigate those situations. And that's what I love about them. Okay, sometimes some of them may be judgmental, but in a good way, in a
Come on.
good way. They
They
they tell
always
me
are.
how it is, right?
Yeah.
But the best part, I think, is that they're willing to listen and to kind of like walk me through it, knowing, what,
Mhm.
I'll reach my destination in my due time, but they're there as a backbone or a foundation should I like require that extra support.
Do you find like you've done a number of, I mean, you've said it yourself, you've had a number of sort of career transitions and like not just sort of new jobs, but new
Yeah.
careers, right? Where you've made these different jumps, and some of that has been entrepreneurial in terms of starting things, which always carries risk and fear.
Yeah.
Have you found it to be maybe not easier, but is that a space where you find having a community that just is really there for you, Sumi, as a person? Does that kind of help you navigate
Yeah,
those
no,
moments?
definitely. And some of my career transitions, looking at it from the surface level, can seem quite like, why is she in this,
Oh yes,
right? Or how
I'm
does
very
she?
familiar personally with explaining to people like, what are you doing in your
Yeah,
career? And you're
exactly.
like,
So,
I don't
like,
know, God.
why am I there? What
Yeah,
got me there? I think much like yourself, having been in tech, some days I'm the only woman, I'm sometimes the only person of color in the
yeah,
room in many sort of career transitions. And they've been kind of there to help me even just be a support
mm,
when I need it. And I think that certainly has reassured me. Like, it's like, whenever I have an imposter syndrome or so feeling kind of like out of sync, there's one friend that I tend to call. She's a few years older than me, was, a VP of marketing at one point, had a full career transition into media and stuff. And when I feel a little bit of like out of sorts, like, should I be here? I give her a call and she gives me a talking to be
yeah,
like, yes, you're okay. You can be there. You should be there. It's okay. And those are the sort of the chats that I have. It's like, I think many of us go through imposter syndrome many times over, right? And it's just that reassurance to be able to say, hey, you know what, yes, you should be at the table. Yes, you've earned your spot. It's not unheard of. Like, it's all good. Sometimes you kind of just need that reassurance, even though that you should be there. There is that
yeah.
little doubt in the back of your head, and having that extra sort of voice to validate what you probably already know is always helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the mentorship of having someone there to just gut check that, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we think about mentorship. I know before earlier in my career, everyone's like, "Oh, you need a mentor. You need a mentor." I'm like, "What does that mean?" Like, I don't know what. Like, do I and how do I find? Do I just
I
call people? Like, do I? And I'm having coffee with someone I respect, and I'm just like, "Can you be my mentor?" Like, what am I doing here?
It feels forced, doesn't
It
it?
feels so forced and it feels so abstract when people sort of say you need to get a mentor, right? But like what I've realized, and maybe it's helped that I've realized how many people I now have become a mentor to, is that I mean, I imagine for some people it can be much more kind of like rigorous or formal or, structured or something. But so often it's just having that person who's got a couple of years on you. And maybe this is particularly true like for women because we seem to have imposter syndrome or at least talk about it a lot more than men. But like, yeah, having someone you can just call up and just be like, gut
Mhm.
check, like I need to tap into your wisdom for 5 minutes and just be like, am I crazy? Am I not? Should I keep going? And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, you're not crazy, keep
Yeah.
going. But it's having someone you can call and hear that from that I think makes such a difference.
No, definitely. It's happened to me many, many times, and just having the groups to call in and just be say, am I on the right course? Like, am
Yeah.
I reading this wrong? Or like, they've had that years of experience, but yeah, my mentorship, like the folks that have been in my life as mentors, that I would call mentors, or more than that, like champions, they've come to me like organically. It's like,
Yeah.
I've met them through, whether it's through networking or through work, and it just happened. I've tried sort of like the structured route at times, and it just felt forced, and it didn't feel like there was a sync. Like, yes,
Yeah.
we may have had similar, career paths, and like they're somebody that, of course, I like in awe of, but it sometimes doesn't always click. But the
Mm.
ones that have like clicked for me, they've been like organic. They're like the ones that I've been like, hey, I kind of like this person. I just want to meet them,
Yeah.
right? And get to know them, and they get to know me and my story and what I'm doing, and they become interested in sort of my career path and my advancement. So they kind of just naturally want to help
Hmm.
and are open to, like, if I give them a call, it's not like I'm calling them because I want XYZ. It's just like, hey, I have this idea, like, what do
Yeah,
you think? Right.
exactly. Just need to chat.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the moment you find yourself in now, because you have had so many incredible experiences up to this point, and such a diversity of different experiences. And now it seems like you're entering a bit of a period of sort of, I don't know if it's pause or reflection or how you would describe it. I'd call it a midpoint, but it is. And I mean, takes one to know one. When I read your stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, this was me last year. Yeah. And I love it. So, some of the stuff that you've been writing touches on a whole range of things around leadership and life. And I was reading your piece on toxic work environments, which I so recognize myself in, things with like balancing family and career. And so, yeah, talk a little bit about where you're kind of finding yourself right now and how this moment's showing up for you.
Yeah, I guess midpoint is a good definition of it. My friends think it's Sumi 3.0.
Yeah, for sure.
It kind of happened. I mean, I think I was gradually kind of working towards it, and then everything just aligned with sort of I left my role at the college and kind of thinking sort of like, I'm in my mid 40s. What do I do? Like,
Yeah.
I've been there for a couple of years. It was an opportunity that came up during COVID, because the startup that I was working at, like every other startup during COVID, had to kind of do a bit of a
Ramp
pause.
down. Yeah.
And I mean, at the end of the day, we still have to pay our bills. And, it was a great opportunity. I worked with a great team and all, but, it had gone kind of probably run its natural course. And
Yeah.
I had in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm in my mid 40s. What do I want to do? What's my legacy?
Yeah.
And I was like, to think I'm starting to think about my legacy, it's like, it's daunting. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm that old now.
Yeah. We're on
Right?
the back half.
Yeah. So I've been like kind of thinking a lot about it. It's sort of
Mhm.
like no regrets. Let's get out there. I guess like the timing just kind of all aligned. And then I found myself, okay, I'm done with that. So what's next? And I think that you read the piece where I was like, oh, I'm gonna go on vacation and I'm gonna find myself, sort of the eat, pray, career, love sort of
Yeah.
opportunity.
100%.
That didn't happen because, like many of us at our age, we have aging parents.
Mhm.
And my father wasn't well, so as a family decision, I went to Sri Lanka to pick him up. He's retired, so he spends parts of his time there, and it did give me a lot of time to kind of think and reflect on sort of the stage I'm
Mhm.
at in how do I support my father in his sort of transition. It's not an easy time for him, and being there for the family, but at the same time sort of like, what's next for me? So I guess I'm doing a lot of sort of thinking. I'm meeting a lot of people. It's weird because I've been so busy with my previous role. I
Mhm.
only saw certain people at certain times, or reconnected with certain community or networks, maybe not as frequently as I should, but I have been finding, since now he's out of the hospital and recovering, it's given me a little bit more time to kind of meet folks and just kind of be like, sort of, what are you doing? Here's what I'm kind of thinking about. Do you think I'm in the right track? Like,
Mhm.
is this is this where I should be? Like, a friend of mine is like, you're a gluten for punishment. Why are you thinking of doing this again?
Right.
But I think, like a lot of us, there's always a drive to do more, to like, I want to create, I want to do certain things. And I've always kind of like, And it was something that I wanted to do. I wanted to help other people build their dreams. And I think to a certain degree I have, or been certain stages of their dreams. And, there's been things that have been percolating in the back for me that I'm like, maybe it is time. So I'm kind of wading through the waters to see if it's right, validating with the people,
And
folks
this
that I
is
think
to launch like a new
a new
startup or
venture.
business or venture
Yeah.
project, however you want to describe it. That's exciting. That's really exciting. There's something so powerful though also about having that moment, like to be able to think about this when you're not working,
Yeah.
right? And there's like a privilege for sure to, be in a place where you're not working and not like in full-blown panic attacks
Yeah.
about money every day, because that's very real too, and for lots of folks. But if you can be in a position even for a brief period where you can turn your mind, you can
Yeah.
release your mind from, the day to day of a job or thinking about the next job for a little while to really like, yeah, reflect on, take stock of where you've been, who you want to be. Like, I think, that's a big part of why I describe this period as a midpoint review,
Mhm.
because it feels like, certainly I'm sure, the quintessential midlife crisis is down the road at some point, maybe, but like, there is this moment where you have hit a point in your career where you have done so much, and so many random different things, right? Like we were talking about this before we hit record, where, we have these bios now. And I said, I remember being at events when I was in my late 20s and hearing people get introduced on the stage, and they would, their bio would be read. And I was like, who the hell are these crazy people who have done
You
so
know.
much and like be so intimidated? And then I hear my bio read and now, and I'm just like, who is this lady? Like, what just happened? But we have, I mean, time accumulates experience, right? And so, yeah, but you hit this moment where you've done all these things. And then it's like, so often we just keep hamster wheeling down the path, right? But if you have that opportunity to get
Yeah.
off the wheel for, even a short period of time, and then intentionally decide if you want to get back on a wheel, which wheel you want to get back on, if you want to be a free hamster and go live in the grass. Like, it's, there's choices, right? And we
Yeah.
forget that there's choices sometimes.
No, and then I think like you hit it. I mean, it is a privilege, right?
Mhm.
Like not many people certainly have that opportunity, and I think you're seeing it in the job market right now, where there's a lot of
Right.
companies and sectors going through a number of transition. I acknowledge the fact that like I think where I am in my career, I had that privilege of that time to think through,
Mhm.
right? So, and that's something that's also been in the back end of my like sort of like me thinking through all of this is that like like I need to use this time wisely,
Yeah.
right? Because like I'm not I may not get this all the time. And certainly in this job climate, what I want to do is, kind of strike out on my own is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, having done it many times before. And so, wanting to kind of potentially go through that again, it is a hard decision. But I think I am this time around a bit more privileged to have a bit of time to kind of think through those. So one of the thing is that I am trying to do is be intentional in sort of who I'm meeting with, sort of what I'm learning, and sort of how I go about this process as well. Whereas my previous sort of iteration of it, I was very new to it. I mean, I've helped other startups and stuff, but I was, I think, naive about some of the learnings that
Mhm.
I have had since then. And so I am a bit more intentional about sort of like thinking through some things and meeting with the right folks and whatnot,
Mhm.
but also thinking through sort of my time.
Mhm.
Right. It's, I've gone through the time where like, the hustle was like everything for me,
Yep.
right? Like you're at every event and you're meeting everybody. But I mean, yes, when you're still building something new, you still have to hustle. But I think it's certainly a lot more intentional, is what I would say this time around. And I'm also building in because of my midpoint that I am in, a bit of rest for myself, right? I don't want to burn out. I'm coming out of a period where I thought, well, I was probably heading towards a burnout. And, for me, a burnout is very much a high functioning, overachieving sort of thing. And then I've heard that from other people's as well. It's not necessarily like you crash and burn, but, you're at maybe a 200 performing at 200%, and your health and other areas might like suffer. And so I'm trying to be kind of keep using the word, but intentional in how I'm doing it and sort of how I face it out. So in that, like, I do have a bit of a rest. I have time for my family built in. Right, time for me built in. And that's the other thing that my friends are laughing about. It's like it's the sort of the Sumi period, because like it's time for me, and I need
100%.
to like have that, because I think I, like everybody else, the hamster wheel's been like spinning and spinning over the last couple of years, and haven't really had time to take stock of what I wanted, or what I wanted to do, or just take a break itself, right? So
Yeah, I was gonna ask, and I love that you brought that up around how to balance the hustle of starting something new with the avoidance of and beyond avoidance of burnout, like structuring your life in a way
yeah,
where it feels not just even sustainable, but that balanced, right?
yeah,
Like it's so easy. I mean, we've both gone through it of where it consumes you. It's
yeah,
really hard for a startup to not consume your identity because it starts as a piece of you, right? It's very personal. It's an idea that you have and you build it out and it becomes just a part of you. And so then I remember very clearly when I was building Palette, that, there was a point and I could only see it after I left and had the time to reflect on it. But looking back, there were many moments where had you asked me like, AJ, what does success look like for you in 5 years? All I would have told you was the goals Palette had for
yeah,
growth, right?
pretty
That
much.
was it. Because I had, and it wasn't, I literally had no other real sense of myself. That was
Yeah,
it.
no,
And like, there's a time and place perhaps for that, but in hindsight, it's not sustainable and it's not healthy. There's something really powerful, I think, about folks like us and like so many others who are going through this period of time. And maybe this is where we can talk a little bit about how our generation perhaps can start to do things differently as we get into this age, because we've been um there's like these two opposites of like, for women it's like the girl boss hustle,
yeah,
right? And that's so unhealthy and toxic in so many ways and just not sustainable. And then there's like sort of the like slow life or quiet quitting kind of step away, when it gets really kind of toxic and questionable, you get into like trad wife shit, just like all these like other like extremes of
yeah.
womanhood, and it's like we have this opportunity now to step away and be like, okay, what does it really look like to fulfill this sense of like purpose through work and career, but do it in a way that is like human.
Yeah, and I think going back to, I guess, the title of your podcast, I want a midpoint of that too, right?
Mhm.
I don't want to hustle, hustle, hustle all the time, but
Mhm.
I don't want to just leave everything and quit either,
No.
right? I still want
Yeah.
to do many things, and I think much like you, I had, somebody had asked me a while back, it's like, what do you want for yourself?
Mm.
And like, my whole identity was around whether it's like, my family, the startup, my professional career, and all of that. But they're like, no, but what do you want for yourself? And I found I couldn't answer myself anymore. I thought I knew that like in my 30s and stuff, but like, somebody asked me, I think it was like a year ago or something, and it's been percolating in my head. I'm like, who am I? What do I
Yeah.
want? And what do I want to be known for in the next couple of years? And I couldn't answer myself, because my identity,
Mhm.
as you said, was tied to everybody else's stuff,
Mm.
right? And everything else that I was doing, which, some of it was just survival. Some of it was, just obligations and duties, and not that it's a negative component of my life, but it was very much tied to it.
Yeah.
But as an individual, as me, Sumi, who did I want to be? What did I want to be known for?
Mhm.
And I couldn't quite answer it. And so I think certainly that's another thing that I've been kind of like thinking about. I don't know what the answer is yet.
I was gonna ask. Soft launch your life's purpose on this podcast.
I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but you know what? I do wanna enjoy the process of finding out. And I think, part of that is taking a step back.
Mhm.
And yes, I have drive to build something and all of that stuff. But as you said, like that girl boss era did turn out to be quite toxic, right? And in its own way, it's not entirely like it was entirely bad. I mean, I think, a lot of people kind of own it and do their things. But I realized it wasn't all for me. Like, yes, I want to be a girl boss or woman boss or whatever
Yeah.
you want, but I'm a boss. That's just sort of one of my things. But I don't want it to be my only identity, right? I also want to take some time for myself, and I said for my family, but I also don't want to like quit everything and go live on an island. I mean, as much as that sounds
Maybe a little,
perfect,
it's okay if a little bit you do. I
now
definitely
and
get it.
then, I think, as my friend said, like after 3 days I'd probably get bored, right? I'd
Yeah.
be like, oh, what if I just quit and like, go sit on an island? And they'd be like, that's not you, we know you would be itching to do something within 3 days, and that's it.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, owning that is my personality, and but that I don't need to do both. It's not like I can if I want to, but I don't need to. And so for this stage, how can I be more intentional in what I do and how I show up? I don't have to overextend myself to do things. I can be more smart. Like, I think one of the first thing I learned in politics was to like not work harder but work smarter. And maybe, somewhere down the line, I probably kind of forgot about that, thinking like, if I worked a little bit more harder and harder, things were going to realize. And I think, certainly I'm a little bit wiser, I hope now. It's be more, a bit more strategic in how I do things, and certainly work a lot smarter and not too hard.
Not too hard. And did you feel like at some point, like sometimes working harder is also part of the performance, like that we feel like we need to put on for other people,
Oh yeah.
right? Like, and I think about that, that was something that came up for me a lot when I was going through sort of my era of AJ period of reflection, was how much I was putting on a show for others when it came to um how I might be showing up at work, or
Yeah.
how I might be talking about work, and performing productivity or something like that in different ways that I think just to your point, you start to realize how much you're doing that isn't necessarily for you or even driven by the things that you value,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
um and putting
It's
that aside.
like having to prove yourself always, right?
Hmm.
I've certainly been known to be the person that won't say no, and so I'm learning to say no. There's been periods where I've had that lesson hounded into me by my friends and my colleagues and my superiors. It's like learn to say no. You don't have to do everything.
Yeah.
Maybe it's my background, like coming from an immigrant family, working, striving through like, my period in Rexdale, and to being where I am these days. It's
Hmm.
because, I took it on. I took everything on. I overachieved. I tried to do
Yeah.
as much as possible. And, certain times you still think you still have to prove yourself, right? I think like
Hmm.
going back to your reference about your resume being, read out and you not feeling like it's you. It's like the constant need to prove yourself and to like
Hmm.
kind of overachieve and all of that. It does certainly take a toll. Right. And I think I certainly realized that the last couple of years is that, when things weren't going as well, my thing was to like dig down and prove everybody wrong, right? Show the results even in a bigger and a greater way. And that meant taking on a lot more, not saying no. And it just didn't afford me any time for myself, which does end up causing burnout in a lot of us, right? And so, yeah, I think part of that is also like, you don't have to do everything, is what I keep trying to tell myself, because I was that person, and it wasn't very long ago. It's like a few weeks ago.
The evolution is happening in real time.
It
I love
is. It
it.
is. In that, like, I'm always trying to prove myself, that I have to prove myself that I belong at that table. I have to prove myself that, that you should have the conversation with me, that, I should be on that stage, or whatever, or that, my ROI is meeting everybody's expectations and all of that. It's like, yes, a part of me is very competitive. I think we need to be in the fields that we have been in, but also knowing that it's okay. It's okay not to be that all the time, right? And
Hmm.
I think a lot of us, we were that all the time because we had to be like on
Mm-hmm.
at every single point because we were seen in a certain way. And if we deviated from that sort of personality that folks like viewed us in, then we were no longer a success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another thing that I'm trying to unlearn, is that I don't have to be on all the time. It's okay that like I go home early because you know what, all the socializing and whatever, it's just worn me out.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly through COVID and all, I did kind of like hibernate for a bit. And I
We all
mean, I started writing again and sharing on LinkedIn, and then, and a number of my contacts pinged me and said, "You're alive. We're so happy to see you alive."
did.
I'm like, I haven't gone anywhere. I just been a
Yeah.
little quiet because I've kind of felt like kind of lost my voice.
Mm.
And I guess this is also another period for me where I'm trying to like find my voice. And every time I write something, I feel that imposter syndrome. Somebody's going to call me out and be like, really?
But how has it gone for you so far? Sorry to interrupt, but I just think this is so interesting because I know, like, when I went through my period, I did a
Yeah,
lot of writing and it had a profound effect on me because it was very, I mean, it was very vulnerable,
yeah,
and you're sort of putting it out there. And every time I wrote, I was like, oh my God, someone's going to come at me and like tell me I'm stupid or like that this was a bad take. And it wasn't even
yeah,
like I was just telling, like, you, it's just like
yeah.
personal reflections. It
Personals,
wasn't
yeah,
like I was putting out some big like political statement or something controversial,
yeah,
but the vulnerability of writing. But I found being vulnerable publicly like that changed me. And I'm
yeah,
wondering how, because as I'm catching you sort of mid process and mid evolution, how you've found the process of writing so far. Has it helped to unlock things for you, or let go of some of that sense of imposter
yeah.
syndrome or
It,
whatever?
it, it's. I think I'm certainly kind of going through that stage. And I used to love writing, but I stopped writing because I was like, nobody wants to hear from me. And I don't like, I also was like, somebody's going to call me out and tell me I'm stupid.
Also, I'm just going to pause here because I'm just having this moment of realization too. Like, you think that our early life in politics had an impact on that, like that fear of like, I'm going to put something stupid out there and end up on the front page of the Globe.
I think a part of it certainly was that, but I also found that I mean, I think a lot of us are brave in our teens, right? Like, it's
Sure.
like, I can do, I like whatever. And I think I mean, a little bit of the power that we did have as staffers certainly, kind of blustered sort of our ways. But then there was that point, I think a lot of it was, yes, one, we didn't want to be on the front page. It's very different these days than I think when we were in politics. It's like
Mhm.
if we say the wrong thing, it's like, social media was just becoming
Totally.
something of a norm. But like if you say the wrong thing, you're out. And when you're only one of few people that have the privilege of working in government
Mhm.
on that side, we do kind of guard that opportunity very closely, and you do have that a bit of fear. And I think to a certain part that probably was, and it kind of translated as I left.
Yeah.
It's funny. I can't remember. I may have wrote about it, but I was talking to some friends of mine, and it wasn't in a bad way. This individual had meant it, but as I was leaving government and moving into sort of the real world, because that was a bubble, right? I was told not to be too bossy, not to be too assertive. And I think that also like made me kind of like, okay, like I kind of retreated in my shell. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, I don't know what to say.
Mm.
Because I was like, oh, am I saying the wrong thing? Am I saying it the wrong way? And whatever, whatnot. And I was on this webinar, and the speaker there had said, it's like, Sumi, it's actually their reflection of how they're feeling. It's not on you, right? And that kind of
Mm.
that meant a lot, because I was like,
Yeah.
and I had retreated. And so at that point I stopped writing and all of that and sharing that piece. And I think, like you said, it was kind of like ingrained, like a bit of imposter syndrome, a bit of like retreating. And I think this period, I mean, I was kind of really shy about putting myself out there, kind of like wondering. So I started doing it slowly, kind of just sharing here and there. But I feel like I'm finding my voice again. right?
Yeah.
And
Incredible.
I'm, as like you said, I'm not sharing anything too controversial. And the response has been like, especially with that one, the burnout one I wrote, I didn't really think too much about it. I was just like, I'm sitting in the middle of the
Yeah.
village being like, da 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 da, this is what I'm going through. Right. The amount of people that have messaged me on it and telling me, I went through this because my aging parent or my career transition, and I didn't know, and just being able to, and mostly it has been women
Hmm.
in senior positions, and it was good to see that I wasn't alone, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't by myself. It is something that others have gone through and been able to navigate through. So certainly, gave me a bit of a sense of sort of I can do this as well.
Yeah. And so, sorry,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to just finish. I ran into another political friend, and she had mentioned that she liked reading, and I was like, "Oh, that's great," because I was a little nervous about it, and I was like, I wasn't sure if somebody was going to say something, and she's like, "Don't worry about those individuals. There are those of us that actually this resonates with, and that's who you're writing for, right?" So it might be like just 5 people who like my post. That's totally fine, because if it resonates with those 5 folks and they feel a sort of a synergy of like what I'm going through, we bond through that, right? So it doesn't have to be
Totally.
hundreds and thousands of people that need to like my things, right? It's just
Totally.
if it's reaching the right individuals, I think that does mean a great deal. Sorry, I kind of went off on a
Yeah.
tangent.
No, I loved all of it. This is a show for tangents. No, I think it's so just powerful to recognize like how much there is this audience that you're tapping into. There is a I think sometimes we hold ourselves back from telling our stories because we've been, especially with social media, it's like we get this sense that things our values quantified through likes or something, and it's like, well, and then you put something out there and it gets 5 likes or whatever, and you're like, oh, I guess everybody didn't like this, right? And it's like, that's not the point, right?
No.
And if you can reach a handful of people and have a profound impact on them, that's incredible, and you don't know how that's going to translate, right? And I think that's really beautiful. I want to just touch on, I have a couple more questions
Mhm.
before we go. One of the things, though, I want to pull this back on is how some of the stuff you're talking about that you're experiencing personally might be tapping into some broader trends or themes. The world is in a huge transition period in lots of different ways. And part of that is I think how so many of us are experiencing work and life and
Yeah.
balance in whatever shape that might look like. And it sounds like, to your point, particularly when you're talking about burnout and just reflecting on the role of work in life, it sounds like it's really hit a nerve that's sort of a broader conversation going on.
Yeah.
How do you sort of see some of those larger picture pieces fitting into your personal experience right
Yeah.
now?
So I think the one thing, like certainly around burnout and sort of transition, has certainly brought to light for me sort of how our workforce is structured, right? Sort of just the flexibility of our leadership roles and whatnot. I do like, even I think we found it through the quiet quitting time as well, but a lot more women left the workforce because it didn't fit, or it couldn't like
Can adapt.
adapt to sort of their situation. And I certainly think, and maybe not just women now, because I certainly think there's a lot more men who have to kind of take care of their aging parents as well, that sort of how our work is structured certainly has to change.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably, I don't know if I can be optimistic as to whether it's going to change or not,
Yeah.
but I think those of us that have, whether that power, that are in senior positions, um, can provide sort of that flexibility to our team members, to our colleagues, to being able to kind of step in and help when somebody else is going through, a period of whether it's caregiving or transition or whatnot, and just being that support system within sort of our work environment, I think would be ideal. Being able to have that flexibility of leadership, sort of how our leadership pathways are done,
Mhm.
because like it doesn't all have to be linear, right? I mean, you and I have both gone through various sort of transition. Had I gone the traditional route, I would maybe have been in a higher position by now. But many times over, I stepped back, took a pay cut, took a junior role just to learn certain things. And I think that's the other thing, is that not penalizing folks for doing that
Yeah.
could be another thing that I think we could talk a lot more of, and maybe like hopefully that changes a bit of a mindset. I think both kind of needs a mindset shift in how we as leaders operate, and then the workforce operates itself, right? And having that flexibility. I mean, we were able to adapt during COVID, to be
Mhm.
able to do many things. Why can't that continue on in a,
Yeah.
whether it's in a lesser degree or not? But there's certain learnings that we did kind of get through that pandemic that I think we should continue doing, because we were caregivers during that time to a lot, to many of
Yeah.
our family members. And as many of us in senior positions are starting to age and go beyond that midpoint, we have aging parents. We have,
Right.
some may have young children, but some folks have children with maybe some challenges that they're also competing with, but they may still want to be in the workforce. They may still want that
Yeah.
career. Having that sort of flexible leadership pathway, I think, is one thing that I've chatted about with others, and I think certainly it's a theme that keeps coming up because of all of the layoffs and the transitions that our folks are going through. That our
Mhm.
traditional way of structuring our workforce does need some change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We could do a whole other podcast on this topic, between the way work's changing, the rise of AI, and how that's shifting jobs. I think, the thing that I keep hearing often is, the opportunity to look at white collar part time work. That's something that you don't really see, but that could be a real, I think, game changer from a lot of different perspectives. But that is a whole other conversation that I will have to have you back on, that we can nerd out on. I think though, to your point around when things change and if they'll change and how, that has been something that I've found very interesting about, the elder millennial generation in the workplace.
Yeah,
And I see a lot of social media accounts that joke about this, but I also I know it's true for me. And I talk to a
yeah,
lot of my friends in my generation for whom it's true for as well, that, really self-identify as a group of upcoming or arrived leaders that want to do things differently. And I think that's one of the important things about having these conversations as we all begin to enter our 40s, is to have this moment of like intentional realization that we are in positions of power to start to do things differently. We've come up for so long thinking about like how we wish leadership behaved, and being sometimes quite disappointed in how they show up for different things, and having this moment of realizing that we're leadership now, you know
yeah, yeah,
in so many ways, right? And that doesn't mean we have all the power, but we're increasingly having it, right? And
yeah.
so, how can we make those decisions or speak up to support those kinds of changes, um, now that we're at the table?
Yeah, I think certainly as millennials and elder millennials, we can probably learn a little bit from the Gen Z pop, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I think we sometimes, because we're so conditioned to like just grind through it, right?
Mhm.
That, get through it, you're going to be fine. But I think I've certainly learned from some of my Gen Z team members where they won't put up with it. Right.
Yeah.
And that is perfectly okay. And that's something I think that we need to kind of talk about as leaders, because as you
Mhm.
said, we can make those changes, but also, we don't have to accept how things are just the way they are because it's the status quo anymore. I had a Gen Z who, decided the place wasn't vibing for her, is what she said, and said, you know what, that's it. I'm done. And it was okay. Right. Whereas had I been in her shoe back then, I'd be like, oh my God, I can't do this. I'm going to have to fall in line. And
Mhm.
I think we can certainly learn from that. I mean, I don't think we have to be to that level drastic. I don't think it's in our
Yeah.
conditioning, but certainly I think there's something that we can learn from them, to be like, we don't have to accept the status quo. We
Yeah.
can make changes. And as you said, we are the leaders to affect those changes. We have
Yeah.
that in our power. We sometimes forget that, yes, we are those individuals now that have have that
right?
power to make that change, right?
Well, we've been like the young kids for so long
Yeah.
that we've sort of internalized this narrative. And I was talking in a previous interview to someone who sort of said it's also strange because, in previous generations, a lot of the older generations of folks who are still in the workplace wouldn't be there anymore, right?
Yeah.
And yet they still are. And so it gives us this weird kind of like arrested development energy professionally, where it's like we are leaders, we are gaining power, many of us
Yeah.
are moving into executive positions, but then there are still folks who seem like our parents age, running things. So anyway, it's strange, but either way, the point is we have power, we should use it.
Yeah. No,
This
definitely.
has been a great conversation. I want to ask you, I have one final question, and it's the question that I ask everybody who comes
Mhm.
on here. So we're often asked what would be a piece of advice you would give to your younger self. But since this is a podcast about looking forward, my question is there one piece of advice you would give to your future self that you hope she lives by?
Question. I would say don't lose yourself, right? I think we get caught up in everything else that we forget about us as
Yeah.
individuals. And certainly that's something that I've been reflecting on a lot. And say in the next couple of years, if I were to look back, because sometimes the cycle repeats itself, I hope it doesn't. But I would say I would want to remind myself to kind of be true to yourself, who you are. Hopefully I'll know who I am by then. I'll have that question answered. Whether I know or not, it's like, yeah, just be you, be true to yourself, to whoever you want to be, right? And whatever you want to do, like not to be shy about it. It's okay.
I love that. That is such beautiful back half of life advice, and front half for those listening who haven't hit the midpoint yet. It's perfect advice for someone in the process and journey of remembering who she is. So thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for this conversation. It's been wonderful. I really appreciated it. And I look forward to having you back on when you're ready to launch your startup and tell the world about it.
Thank you. No, I appreciated this opportunity, and it was a lovely conversation. So appreciate it. Thanks, AJ.
Thank you. All right, that's our show. Thank you, Sumi, for being such an amazing guest. And I will seriously be thinking about a next pod about the changing workforce, because there is so much more we could be unpacking there. Thank you again to our sponsor, Habit Coffee Club. Visit www.habitcoffeeclub.com and use promo code midpoint at checkout for 20% off your first purchase. That's it for our show today. We'll see you guys next week.